Welcome, friends, to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are two retired New York City police detectives, and if you like all things true crime related from that police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon. And this guy over here, Ed Wallace, he keeps changing. He changes where he is. He's last time we were live, he was over here. Now he's over there. How's it going tonight, Ed?
Going good, Ron. Yourself?
Not too bad. Thanks for asking. I see you down at the beach location, at the beach house, having a good time, kicking back.
Yes, I'm having my mental health break.
Getting a little R&R. I don't want to call it a mental health break because that sounds a little more serious. But we want to give a special thank you to the Patreon supporters, the channel members. Gigi, New York City, good to see you. Thank you, Corinne, for joining in. Retired Irish Detective. Our Patreon supporters, the channel members, the replay viewers, the folks who give super thanks and super chats during and after the live streams, the replay viewers, and the mod squad. Ed, I don't know what you think, but I think we are both on the same page. We got the best mods in the business.
Absolutely, and we have the best audience too.
Mods and audience, they are one. They're together as one. Tonight we're going to talk about Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach murder suspect. I don't even like to call him a suspect. He's a perpetrator. He's in custody. He's a defendant, innocent until proven guilty. People are already talking about that he's being already in the media and on Twitter, YouTube, and social media already guilty. Listen, there's a mountain of evidence, but tonight we're going to take a look at the cell phone data and the computer data, the computer forensics. Ed, that kind of stuff. You know, we had the NYPD's computer crime squad. We had the commander on and a couple of computer crimes experts. It's a lot of secret squirrel stuff that they do, and there are a lot of capabilities that I know I'm not an expert on this stuff. I know you know about it, but we have a great guest, Tiffany Lenart. She was on with us back when we talked about a lot of different cases, but I believe it was the Kohlberger case. She was on with us talking about the cell phones, the geofencing and so forth. She's a world where she's got a lot of knowledge, Ed. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her tonight.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's get into it because this case, a lot of cell phone data, a lot of electronic data.
Oh, yeah. Before we get right into it, Ed, I hear your phone's buzzing. It's okay. The Hang Seng is still trading right now. But
oh yeah, it's up.
Yeah, there you go. I want to play a little piece of media before we bring her in. This is only 1 minute and 49, but this is going to set up what we're going to be talking about. And it's a little piece from News Nation. Don't get afraid. It's Jennifer Coffendorfer on the screen. I love her. She's a good friend of mine. She's not going to be speaking. So Cuomo did her dirty here. He put her on and he had his other guest talking. So just let's take a listen to this.
How big a deal was the advancement in the ability to do that kind of forensic move, and how was it used here that made the difference?
So cell data, here's something to consider. Cell data, no matter what you do, you can't cover it. The records are the records. You can cover a crime scene with bleach. You can cover up all kinds of physical traces, but cell data records, the user has no way to easily access them or get rid of them. And I don't think a lot of people consider it. So as technology advances, we can dive in even deeper into this evidence.
So you got rid of your burner phone, but the numbers and where they called remains. And was his big mistake, did he make a big mistake? And if he did, was it that he was calling one of the relatives? How do you see it?
So there are a few mistakes. The first one that I would say, I have experience with creating test data all the time. And we create test data to educate people. So when I create test data, I have a burner phone. I create a fake email address. But then I am typically stopped when it comes to financial information because prepaid credit cards are not accepted by many things that you need. And I think the financial information that links back to him, whether he had 5 fake email accounts or 10, it all links back to the financial. So that is what I think is the greatest mistake. I think the vanity comes out with the taunting by using a phone and trying to be 2 people at the same time. You can't do that.
Hey, so there you have it. Without further ado, I want to introduce Tiffany Lenart. She is a returning guest here on Crime Time with DutyRon. Tiffany, How you doing this evening? Thanks for joining.
How are you? Hi, Ed.
Hey,
So right away, I want to put you on the spot. What did you think of that little piece? I don't know much about this technology, but what did you think about what she just said there?
So Heather's pretty on point. She speaks all over the world. She works for Celebrite. She's a SANS instructor. She's an amazing font of knowledge when it comes to cell phones. And the credit card records are damning.
Yeah.
You know, he was smart enough to use a burner phone for his communication with sex workers, but then he paid for it with his own American Express card.
Right. And I want everybody that's tuning in. I did a brief introduction. I actually didn't even tell anybody what your specialty is, but Tiffany is a senior digital forensic examiner, and she's got a ton more experience. So if you could just tell the audience what some of the work that you do, so this way everybody that's tuning in is like, wait a minute, who is this? What is she talking about?
Well, I'm a former federal air marshal, not cyber related, and a cyber crimes detective. And then now I own my own forensic firm, Relentless Forensics in New Jersey.
Outstanding. And I have that. I'm going to link that in the description if that's okay with you. I'll put the link to her website and also to her LinkedIn. So in this case, right, Rex Heuermann, as we know, 7 burner phones, a whole bunch of fake email addresses, but he did something that I picked up on that was mentioned by the district attorney and some of the other investigators. He used his American Express card to either purchase the actual devices or to purchase minutes. Ed, I'm going to go to you. I mean, sometimes criminals are stupid and sometimes they're smart. But in this case, that was a big mistake, and I saw you laugh. But
yeah, because Tiffany and I were just talking about this before we went live, and we were talking about we don't always catch the smart ones. Okay, the guy he made some serious errors. Okay, and that's just the least of it. I mean, that's the credit card stuff. But then he's got the burner phone. Okay, if you're going to use the burner phone, then why are you bringing your personal phone with you to these crime scenes? Okay, and with the burner phone, so now your personal phone and the burner phone and the victim's cell phone are all pinging off the same towers in the same locations.
right.
Okay, and then you take your victim's cell phone and you're traversing back and forth from Massapequa to Manhattan, and with your personal phone, the victim's phone, and your burner phones.
Yeah, and if you read the 32-page bail application, it basically spells out all of his movements and his triangulation, and that's what I want to go into with you, Tiffany. And I know that you had said when we spoke a couple of days ago, that you're fascinated by this case. You're all in on this. Can you talk a little bit about how they spelled out? I mean, I don't want to lead you in an area where you don't want to start here, but this is really the Tiffany Lenart show. So if you could, for the audience, there's over 1,000 people already, and the audience is swelling because people want to know about this digital forensics. Not only is it the computers, but mainly spelled out about the cell phones. So if you could get into that, just give us a little bit of your thoughts on it.
Well, this was such a well-written affidavit. It just really spelled out the layers of this case. And that's what it is. It's layers of digital evidence, from even going in on page 4 of, right up in the beginning of this aff. They're talking about, they served over 300 subpoenas. They have cell tower records, they have the financial records, they have the records from the service provider for his IP addresses from his home, all of the call records from his cell phone, and they're connecting where these phones were and the time and place where the phones were, where these girls went missing. And then, as Ed mentioned, he takes the victim's phone and then he doesn't turn it off. He doesn't get rid of it. He not only keeps it, he keeps it on, and he makes calls from the phone, all in the same places. So we have this overlapping pattern of activity where the The phones are all three together, a burner phone, and he had multiple burner phones. So this happens on different occasions with the different phones. It's pinging in Massapequa when he's home. It's pinging in Manhattan when they know he's in Manhattan because they're checking his financials and he's using his American Express card there. And at the times that the phones are being used by all of the victims' phones are being used to either call their families or to check their voicemails, which is done on more than one victim. The voicemail gets access from the cell phone. And it happens that his cell phone is in the same place as that cell phone at the same time frame.
Yeah, it's pretty damning. Ed, I see you're working the chat already, but we're going to hold the chat questions towards the end of the show. We're going to do a 15-minute Q&A on the questions because I don't want to get kind of derailed here. I want to kind of stick to the cell phone data and the computer data. But as you said here, he was not only taunting victims' families, he was checking voicemails. And there was a lot of questions and a lot of people were saying, how did this guy, how was he able to take one of his victims' phones and get the voicemail? Now, I don't know, maybe you might know this better than I, but back in those year time frames, was it cell phones where you just dialed star, like, I don't know, 77 and it goes to the voicemail and there was no security code? Or I know you have to, like for me now, you have the choice. You could set like a 4-digit code or whatever. How did he get access to the voicemails?
So we're not seeing much about the specific models of the phones, which would be helpful in determining how he was accessing the voicemail.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been that, he could just call in from the device. We also don't know how much time was spent with the victims. And if at some point, if there were a PIN code to access the voicemail, if he was able to obtain that from those girls prior to, their murder.
Right.
Was
And I
really
was
no
thinking that I was thinking that like some type of scenario of like, hey, listen, I'm not gonna hurt you if you tell me your voicemail code, some type of trickery like that or something. But who knows? None of us were there, and
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. How did the phone not lock him out? He kept the phone open all the time. Did he change the settings in the phone so it wouldn't shut down and lock out on him?
Right.
Because like my phone, after a certain amount of time, it'll shut down and lock out. Now you have to have my code to get in the phone. But once you get in my phone, it's a Samsung. But once you get in my phone, all you have to do is go to the voicemail app. There's no code on it. You hit on it, and then my voicemails are right there.
We also have technology is different in 10 years.
Yeah.
In the time since these girls went missing. But checking the voicemail to me was he's checking to see if anybody's looking for them.
Right. He's reading the text too.
Right. Yeah. So as technology advances, there's all different layers of security that get put into place. Obviously, what we have in 2023 did not exist in 2010 and before. The most crazy part about this whole thing is that he continued to keep one of the decedent's phones with him, and he traveled, according to the affidavit, to Iceland, where his wife, I don't know where the connection is there or whatever it is. I know the investigators know that, but all the communication ceased when he went out of the country. And then the day he returned, according to the bail application, it began. It started back up again. And it just goes to show that, he said, oh, I'm just going to disconnect from this. I'm going to shut it down. But then he turned it back on and started his taunting. Hey, I wanted to talk to you because a lot of people have questions about CAST, the FBI, the CAST team, what they do. We know that this task force was put into place in February of 2022. And by March, I believe 14, 2022, they identified Rex as a perpetrator, as a perp in this case. What kind of capabilities does that FBI CAST team, and what does it bring to the table as far as the task force goes, Tiffany?
You have so many people that are just so brilliant working on these FBI teams, the CART teams, everybody that's down at Quantico. You have great minds that are there, just working constantly, and you have so many people, and that's the benefit to bringing the FBI in, is you have all of these resources now, and they're able to comb through and look at all these records and establish patterns. And that's Heuermann he has patterns over and over again. He does the same thing. And then he uses, when I'm going to find the page in the affidavit where it is, when he's creating these fake identities, he's using his middle name. He's using things that still relate back to him. So he's making a pattern, to trace that I'm not going to say it was easy to follow, but from the time that this task force was put in place to this arrest now, it really has been not a long period of time to put this case together that had gone cold for so long.
What else, if you were involved in this case, Tiffany, where would you start with the data?
So it looks like initially where they started here was they started getting records surrounding him based on the tip about the Chevy Avalanche. His name comes up, and then they go through cell phone billing. They get cell phone billing records for him, cell site locations. I think the way they approached it was great. And something that sometimes can be left out is maybe someone won't think, oh, let's pull the financials as well. Let's pull this. Let's see where everything is. They know where his wife's phone is. They know where his phone is. They know the IP addresses from his house. They connect that and those identities to all of the fake email accounts. Then they were able to connect some of the burner phones directly to him through purchases. And then they tie it all up with a bow when they're surveilling him. They get the surveillance video from the store, so they pull that video, but they also have eyes on him, watching him. So they're constantly corroborating each new piece that comes up with another piece of evidence. It was a great way to approach all the layers of this case. And then
So
once you add in that DNA, it goes from circumstantial digital evidence to no, a reasonable person would believe this man committed this crime.
So it seems like the search of possible DMV records leads to the avalanche, which leads to the registration information for the avalanche, and his driver's license, his name's address, date of birth, all that pops, even a photograph if they do the DMV search and get the photo. And then they go into serving subpoenas and warrants on all the cell phone providers, the internet providers, the bank records, the credit card records. All his movements are now being tied together.
Right. I got one question, Ed. I'm sorry to cut you off because I was looking at the application. So September 2nd of 2010 is when Rex Heuermann came back to Costello's location for the second time after that ruse was perpetrated against him, and she agreed to go back out with him on that date. It was September 2nd of 2010. My question to you, Ed, is, and maybe even Tiffany, I'll go to you first, Ed, on this question. And I'm sorry that I just killed the whole continuity of this whole thing, but why didn't they then take her cell phone records and start doing, because the boyfriend or slash pimp, he made the missing persons report shortly thereafter, the second. I think it was on the 3rd that he called Suffolk County. So I'll start with you, Ed. Why didn't the investigators start pulling all this stuff at that time?
Even in 2010, you could have pulled, went through the cell phone, saw all the incoming and outgoing calls, all the text, all the emails that are on the phone. All of that could have been obtained at that time. And then search
DMV too, right?
Well, DMV
avalanches.
Had the avalanches, right? As we spoke of earlier. I mean, you do a search, Suffolk County avalanches, Chevy avalanches. How many registered Chevy avalanches are in?
It's right on the border of Suffolk and Nassau.
Right, you do that search.
Heuermann, which is Suffolk, and he lived, as we know now, in Massapequa Park, which is a short jump from there.
That's correct. And you do that search, and based upon the description from the pimp boyfriend, you would have all that information, and then you pull a DMV photo, you do a photo array to the boyfriend, and says, and ask him, hey, look through these photos and see if you see the guy that you remember the night you pulled the scam on. And then it would have popped. And he said, that's the guy right there, right? You would hope that would be the case, right? And then from that point on, from 2010, now you could have zoomed right in on him just based on her phone records, DMV records, and then you go out and you start doing everything you did now with the task force. You get internet provider, the cell phone provider, subpoena these people, start tracking all of this.
Yeah, Tiffany, your thoughts on what we're talking about here?
I feel like sometimes when it comes to like certain members of society and it's a sex worker gone missing, it may not have been treated as a true missing person, because a lot of times people just assume, they don't look at it from the perspective of, yes, that's someone's child that's missing. They look at it as, okay, it's a sex worker. She might have been addicted to drugs. She might have just left the boyfriend. We don't know. We're busy. We have other stuff going on, and it gets pushed to the side, which it shouldn't. But that may have been what happened in this instance.
Yeah, DutyRon and I have talked about this time and time again with missing person cases. They're not taken seriously in the beginning. And then and it turns out later on, maybe the missing person case turns into a homicide. And now that crucial time period in the beginning, when it was first reported, all this information is lost and all the potential evidence and so forth associated with the crime is gone.
Yeah. And, Tiffany, you hit on a great point. Tons of Long Islanders and people who have been following this case, they've been screaming from the rooftops that, and including the victims' family members, because these girls were prostitutes / sex workers, however you want to refer to them. I've received a couple of emails like, oh, don't refer to them as sex workers. Listen, we're trying to have this conversation, and no way that we say it is going to sound right. But you hit the nail right on the head. A lot of times, police departments, not just Suffolk County, NYPD as well, these girls sometimes get abducted by their pimps and by associates for days on end, and then all of a sudden they return. So maybe it wasn't taken as serious. That's a possibility. And that argument has been out there for a long time, because these sex workers, these prostitutes, they have been showing up on Long Island and some of them dismembered as well. A great deal of them dismembered and discarded like trash all across Long Island. It's not just the Gilgo Beach area. This thing spans right over here by my own house at Hempstead Lake State Park in Nassau County, all the way up into, way out east in Suffolk County, past the Gilgo Beach. And we're talking about 4 potential connections into Atlantic City, New Jersey. So, and the common denominator is they're all, prostitutes / sex workers. So it's pretty sad.
Well, that industry has been notorious for homicides. It's a very dangerous and dirty profession. And, a lot of times, I've had numerous prostitutes found dead on the streets of New York, or hotel rooms, or one time a garbage can, back of a trunk, you name it, I've had it.
Yeah. Money, drugs, and that whole game, that whole sex game, is just violent people. And I remember back in the 90s where there would be streetwalkers all over Pennsylvania Avenue in East New York, right over by the White Castle on Pennsylvania and just right off the Belt Parkway. And it was just crazy the amount of homicides and shootings that would happen over there.
Hello? Did we lose him?
No, I did. I hit the desk.
Okay. I remember when I was in college at Pratt Institute and driving home and getting stuck at traffic lights by the BQE and having all these pros and drug dealers approach me when I was stuck at the traffic light and couldn't move nowhere. Right. It was back in the 80s. It was prevalent in the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely. so there's so many parts to this thing. It's not just the cell phone data, but he seemed to have really outdid himself when it came to communication, because now we're hearing from other sex workers who are going on News Nation that have been on dates with this guy since in 2015, way after these remains were found and these crimes were committed. And another one in 2020, I heard tonight before we went live. It was on, I believe, News Nation again. So I thought in my mind as an investigator, the COVID-19, that happened in 2020, right around St. Patty's Day. New York was shut down, and I'm sure Jersey was the same thing, Tiffany. So it hit the country right around March of 2020. But this guy, it didn't stop him. I thought that would just kind of put the brakes on his communication, because nobody wanted to come into contact with anybody. I mean, I was, I never, we wouldn't wish that back onto ourselves in a long, in our worst nightmare. So the thing of it is that it didn't stop this guy. He still is communicating with these people in 2020. So it's kind of crazy. But that's what we were dealing with here. The other component to this thing is, yeah, you can't,
because he, even with his behaviors with the phones, he would do one sort of smart thing. Okay, I'm gonna communicate with these girls and with this burner phone to try to hide my identity, but he pays for it with his own credit card. Then I'm gonna email them from fake email addresses that I made from my house, where all of the logs that every time you log into your email account from a device, the IP address gets associated with the account. Those are logs that investigators can obtain from the service provider, and it shows it's in his home. So he tried to hide his identity, but obviously didn't have enough of that knowledge to figure out how to do that better.
Right.
Since you brought it up, Tiffany, what if he would have used a VPN? How much more difficult would that have been?
A VPN ultimately would have obscured his IP address's identity. And then it also depends. Or if you're using a paid VPN or a free one, the free ones can slip. And if they slip even for a few seconds and you get that IP address of the house, it's still there. He probably would have slipped up in another way then, but he's also from his phone accessing the fake accounts. So he was just sloppy all over with
Yeah, and
these
you can't.
devices. Like,
You'd have to purchase the VPN. It's typically online, and you have to use a credit card. So he might have, if he had no qualms about using his American Express card to buy a burner phones and add time to it, he probably would have used his American Express card to buy the VPN.
Right.
and dependent upon what kind of VPN it was, there were times when I would send subpoenas to VPNs and I would get back, hey, no, we keep no records. That's our thing. We don't keep any records. But then sometimes they'd be like, okay, but we do have some records and you got to us fast enough. So here you go. Here's the subscriber. And it would usually be someone in another country, but
Right. Yeah. Hey, let's say hello to a couple of people in the chat. Sean B, good to see you. Allison BD, thank you for being here, and thank you for being a channel member. Glory Days is here. There's some people in the chat saying, you're giving up trade secrets to the criminals. What we're discussing here is stuff that's readily available, and that has been, we're not giving up trade secrets. So I saw one of the commenters in the comments, you're helping to educate some of the bad guys. Listen, again, like I said, we're not going over stuff that's not been out there and that's not readily searched in the Google search bar. So but I want to say thank you to Joey Brooklyn as one of our greatest moderators and good friends here, longtime supporter. As a matter of fact, the only reason I'm here on YouTube is because of Joey Brooklyn. So big shout out to Joey Brooklyn. Lieutenant Pete Pranzo, Harlem Raiders. He is a retired NYPD lieutenant, and he worked in the street crime unit. So thank you for being here, boss. It's always good to see you. Fuzzy Doxy. My wife goes crazy when she sees that screen name because we have a dachshund and she loves the Doxy. So hello to Fuzzy Doxy, and thanks for joining. So circling back to the computer searches and his office, he did not shy away from communications from his Midtown Manhattan office during the day, but it was described by the police commissioner, Rodney Harrison. he was described as being an evil demon once the night comes. And like you said, Tiffany, he couldn't stop these urges. And that's why when people present the question to Ed and I, do you think that this is it, that he just was a part of these four? You know, he's charged with the three, and he's, you know, probably going to have his charges upgraded shortly. That's why when people ask us, you know, do you think that this was just it for him? I would have to say no. And Tiffany, I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, they're extending the search at this point because he owns property in South Carolina. He has another home somewhere else, I believe. And then this is a man who traveled as well. So this gives so many people he could have come in contact with,
Yeah.
especially
Like,
with he's constantly approaching and messaging and arranging meets with these girls all of the time for years. I find it hard to believe that there were only four.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was actually approaching women in public parks. He apparently was in various groups on the internet where he would converse with the young lady. You saw the young lady had a voicemail that she kept from him that was really creepy.
Yeah.
Voicemail that she left the group and he called her, and you know, it's like
we played that on our last video, Ed. Remember that thing up was on TikTok? The Suffolk County District Attorney, he is going around and giving a lot of press conferences and speaking to, we're going to play here, this small little report here with News Nation. But he does, in all of the news reports and all of the interviews that he's given to these reporters, he is saying, you know, that it was a collaborative effort, you know, state, federal, and his local Suffolk County Police Department. But he does talk about all of the cell phones, because this reporter asks him quite a bit about the cell phone. So let's just take a listen to it and give ourselves a break here. And we'll be back to you guys in 2 seconds.
Attorney Raymond Tierney. Raymond, you just held a press conference announcing the charges against Rex Heuermann. You arrested him yesterday after this decade-long investigation, but really all the work seemed to really happen in the last, 13 months?
Yep. Since March of 2022, March 14, 2022. That's when we identified, or the defendant Heuermann was identified as a suspect for the first time. And that's really when we focused all of our investigative resources on him.
And what was the breakthrough in all of this case? I mean, there have been so many years where nothing happened. This task force comes together. Was it just different minds all coming together? Tell me what broke it for you. What broke this thing wide open?
Well, I mean, I think there was some, interesting evidence. There was great phone evidence that was developed by the FBI, which had developed two areas of interest in the area where it turned out the defendant lived, and another area where it turned out he worked. There was also a eyewitness evidence with regard to an individual who matched his physical description, being with the victim, Amber Costello, on the night before she disappeared, and also before she left. Amber Costello said, "I'm going to meet this guy again."
Right.
So all of those things taken in conjunction with the hair evidence, the advancements in mitochondrial DNA, and then putting it all together, getting abandonment samples, not only from the defendant, but from family members, and then being able to compare some of that DNA that was left at the scene with the defendant and his family's DNA.
Did you have the defendant and his family under surveillance for this entire past year?
Not for the entire past year, but we starting, once we developed him as a suspect, and then once we developed him as a suspect, we executed about 300, subpoenas, search warrants, and once we learned more and more about him, we ended up with the help of the FBI.
Ed, it sounded like he was basically telling her, no, we haven't had him under constant surveillance, and it was 16 months.
Yeah, he was going down that road, and then he slammed on the brakes real quick.
Yeah. This is almost done, so let me just play a little more, because she presses him a little bit more on the forensics. So I would just want to, and people in the chat, especially I saw one of our great friends in the chat. She said, "Oh no, this guy again." We'll get into that in a few minutes, but let's just take a listen to the rest of this.
FBI, as well as Suffolk County Police Department, putting him on extensive surveillance.
And he was obsessed with finding out what you guys were up to.
Yes. Well, he had used a lot of burner accounts, a lot of fictitious email addresses. We were able to pierce that and link it back to him. And then we were looking at his searches, and he was obsessed with both the victim's family, as well as what exactly we were doing in our investigation. And when I first took office, I told everyone, don't mistake our not speaking with the media with the fact that we're not doing anything. One of the biggest assets that any investigation could have is we have investigative secrecy, and that means that the targets don't know what we're doing and don't know how close we're getting.
I've got to ask you, the murders he is charged with committing all happened between 2007 and 2010. Do you think he stopped killing in 2010?
Well, as I said, this grand jury investigation has to do with the so-called Gilgo 4, those 4 young ladies who died between 2007 2010. They were buried in basically the same location on Gilgo Beach. And there's a lot of similarities in those crimes. That's what we're investigating. And that's we've charged 3 out of the 4 murders. We still need to charge the Maureen Brainerd Barnes murder. We're going to continue to investigate that, and so that's what we're working on. But
I know that you're focused on that, but do you really think he just all of a sudden stopped killing? What you're describing here is a sadistic serial killer who really, got off on really inflicting horrible, horrible harm and killing these women, and then calling their family and torturing them and taunting them. Do you really think he just stopped cold turkey in 2010, or could he be killing and continuing his killing spree?
It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what I can prove. Right now, I could prove these 3. We feel we could prove these 3 murders. We are going to work on that last murder. And then with all of the information we've gotten with regard to the search warrants that we've executed in connection with the defendant's arrest, we're going to look at that information, and we'll follow the case and the evidence wherever it leads us.
You also just found out in the last few months he was using burner phones again and reaching out to sex workers again. Do you think he may have been planning another killing?
I think that it's pretty clear that since 2007 he was using burner phones and contacting sex.
The answer to that is yes. That's not the only reason they took him off the street, but it was one of the primary reasons.
Sex workers on a consistent basis.
Ray Tierney, I have to say, I looked at the list of the sites that he was searching under these phony internet accounts and email addresses that he had. This is really dark stuff.
Yes. When we investigated the case, we started the grand jury, and, as I said at the press conference, it's a continuum. It's, a balance between keeping the public safe as well as proving your case.
All right, I had enough of that. Ed, I wanted to go to you with cell phone and forensic data from his computers. How important is that going to come into play when they expand this investigation outside of Suffolk County, Vegas, South Carolina, New Jersey, and so forth? How big is that going to be? Because we know he likes to communicate.
Well, yeah, he's got actually the timeshare in Vegas. He's got a place up in the state of Mass. So wherever he's traveled, if he's in this jurisdiction now and he's using his phone or his computer to contact sex trade workers in those locations, that's going to be big as well. It's going to be information that the task force, if they do find it, should then provide to that jurisdiction or notify that jurisdiction, hey, we have this. Maybe you guys should start looking to see if you have any unsolved homicides, and see if there's any evidence from those homicides that we can link here, and cell phone records of their victims to see if, they have to run down every phone number that's in his phones. Anybody that he's talked to, those phone numbers have to all be run down to see whose phones they are and to reach out to those people to see what their connection is to this defendant. In addition, now he's in CODIS. Now, I would imagine once they put him in CODIS, if there was crime scene DNA, unidentified crime scene DNA from various crime scenes, say in Vegas or Massachusetts or other parts of the country, even the world. Well, not so much the world, because CODIS wouldn't have the international database, but because he's also gone to Iceland a lot, so we got to check that as well, to see if there was unidentified DNA in the system from crime scenes involving homicides in those jurisdictions where he had traveled to. I would think by now CODIS would have popped on him, and we would know that. And
yeah, so I mean, for those of you who don't know what CODIS is, Ed, could you just explain to the audience what CODIS is and the significance of now this perpetrator, in this case, the defendant, Rex Heuermann's DNA being in CODIS?
CODIS is the combined offender DNA database held by the FBI. And so you have two sets of DNA databases in there. You have your known offenders, okay, and then you have your unidentified, say, crime scene DNA samples that are in there. And the two databases are constantly being compared against each other, and local and state law enforcement and federal law enforcement are constantly putting DNA information into the systems for searches and queries.
So if he was to have allegedly committed another crime, and evidence was collected, DNA from those crime scenes, it would come back with an unknown male's DNA, right? Now that he's in there, I'm just doing this for the audience. All of these unsolved cases, or cases where they've collected evidence where they're not able to identify the individual, now they can match them up through this FBI database.
So now CODIS too. If like there was a crime in Vegas and there was a crime in Massachusetts, and they have an unknown male DNA, they'll put that into the system in the crime scenes unidentified DNA system, and there'll be comparisons done in there against everybody that's in the unidentified DNA. And now if Vegas has a DNA match for this guy, and Mass has a DNA match, and they still don't know who he is because he wasn't in CODIS at the time, they would still have two separate cases in two separate jurisdictions that match, so they know they have an offender that potentially committed a crime in Mass and potentially committed a crime in Nevada. Mm-hmm. And so they'd be constantly searching, looking for this person, and then checking against the offender database. So now he's in there. Okay, right. So if there was these unknown DNAs from him from other jurisdictions, I would think by now, as I said earlier, that it would have popped.
Right. And his physical description too, like he's 6'6" to 300 and something pounds. I mean, this is a big guy, and he stands out like a sore thumb. And if you saw him, you would remember him. I would have to say.
Yeah, well, for me, when I saw him, my first impression was, Family Guy, Peter Griffin. Okay, and I'm not trying to be funny, but that's who he came off, especially when he was wearing the glasses. I said, "Holy shit, it's Peter Griffin." Okay, and so like that would stick out in my mind. I would remember that.
Right.
The guy looks like Peter Griffin, right? Yeah. In fact, his coworkers called him that. That was reported in a news story.
So, Tiffany, I wanted to ask you, as it pertains to these cell phones, so let's just say investigators now were able to collect all 7 of those burner phones that they're talking about. What, if any, data can they get out of that and link it back to these cases that have been so far in the past? In other words, I saw a question go by, and this is why I'm asking it to you. Can they take his current data when he was arrested just last week, just 7 days ago, and look at that data from within those? I guess what the person was trying to ask is, do these burner phones act just like one of these regular phones that we use, because he's adding minutes onto it? Can they extract data from the recovered phones after he's arrested and look back into these cases and see his communication, or there's not going to be anything on it?
The data that's resident, if he's not deleting it off that phone, it's still there. So whether he runs out of minutes or stops using the phone, all the prior messages, unless he's deleted them, are going to be there. And in some instances, you're able to recover the deleted messages. So they'll be able to see the numbers he was communicating with and the content of those communications. And I tend to think he probably did not. If he's keeping all this stuff, I mean, he was arrested with a burner phone in his pocket. He
Right.
probably did not go through and delete those messages.
But isn't the cell phone provider have records of that as well?
They do, but depending on how far it goes back, every internet service provider has a different retention period. And I
Mhm.
think they even referenced it in one part of the affidavit about how the records for the wife's cell phone at that certain date that they were no longer there. And it depends. Each, Verizon might be 180 days, or,
And as you
sometimes they go back a little farther than they tell you they have, but there
Right.
is a time period where those records are not going to be there anymore.
And there's also encrypted services that you could use, like WhatsApp or Signal or any number of other things. But as you said, if you don't delete those text messages, if you don't delete the record of the calls you made on those on your phone, when your phone is then seized, it can be opened up and then that information is right there. But if you delete it, they're using encryption and the services don't save that information.
Right.
Yes. If it's still on the phone, it's easy to obtain. With
Yeah.
it, and even with WhatsApp, you can obtain it when it's on the phone. It is a little trickier if it's not there anymore, because they are saying that they can't read the messages themselves, that it's encrypted, they don't keep the content, they don't have it.
Right. Right.
And mods, we're going to keep the tip line. If you guys can put it in the chat, I'm going to link it in the description because the tip line is still active and open. So the task force is still actively pursuing any and all information as it pertains to any of these cases. I thought it was interesting that News Nation walked up to Rex Heuermann's wife's sister's home. And I think she's a pharmacist. They refer to her as a doctor, and someone says she's a pharmacist. My niece is a pharmacist, and we call her doctor, So, so he walked up to her home and asked her some questions, and she actually answered some of the questions. She didn't give him much, but I wanted to play this little piece because it seemed like this family, and we're getting a bird's eye view of the total chaos in that home and how not clean the basement, at least. And I have to assume that the inside of that house, what did the police commissioner refer to it as? He didn't call him a hoarder. He called him a
Pack rat.
Yes, thank you, Ed. Pack rat. So they referred to him as a pack rat. And I know that if I'm here in my home, if I tried to play that pack rat game, my wife would be like, oh no, you're picking up your socks. You're picking so inside of that house, according to investigators, is total chaos, and nothing is in order. And when we saw the basement, we knew right away that was the case. But let's take a listen to, I want some of the people from outside the country. Oh, here we go, Ed. It's happening again. Look.
Oh no.
Oh no. So I'm trying to share something and it won't let me. I gotta get Josh in on this little bit of a snafu that I'm having. There it is. Let's let it play. I'm not even going to do anything.
Investigations across our country really open up at about the same time we're seeing the search warrant execution here in Long Island seem to close down. I've been speaking to some of the police officers that you might see here behind me. They tell me it sounds like things are wrapping up. Today marks the 6th day of that long and painstaking process where we've seen them pull just about everything.
By the way, that's my brother, retired Lieutenant Mikey there. He said, I'm going to bed. Night, night, duty runners. Thanks, bro. Thanks for being here. And my brother, I got to get him on, Ed, with us because we got to break his chops. Lieutenant Dan, I call him.
Dan.
Lieutenant Dan, you got legs.
Magic legs.
So that's my brother. Everybody say goodnight to my brother, my older brother, retired lieutenant from the NYPD.
From inside this home as well as from underneath it. In the meantime, I've also had a chance to speak to some of Rex Heuermann's family members about the crimes that he's accused of. In specific, we're talking about his sister-in-law. About 10 minutes from where I currently stand lives Dr. Joanna Ellerup. She answered her door when I came knocking. She told me that she has not seen her sister, Rex's second wife, in days. Take a listen.
We're really not giving out any information. I've spoken to a couple of people already. We don't know anything. We're hearing about most of it on the news ourselves. So we're just going to refrain from saying anything.
Okay.
Okay. We really don't know anything.
Okay. No idea where Asa is.
No idea whatsoever.
No communication with
Nothing.
her. Okay.
Now
Okay.
get off my property.
Anything that you would like to
was nice,
say,
too.
you know, that
No,
we can
just
share on
thank you
behalf?
guys. No, but just thank you. You guys have been very respectful, except for a couple of people. You guys have been very, very respectful.
No, I don't like that at all, Ron.
What, them going up to the house?
Going up to the house, yeah. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, she was referring to a couple of people. Maybe she was referring to some of the YouTubers that go up to people's houses and knock on their doors. I don't know, but it is what it is. But thing of it is that, you know, this is what reporters do. They'll go around into the neighborhoods, and that's why when I went last Sunday with my wife, I stayed in the car and I just filmed from the vehicle just to give everybody a little bit of a view, and then I took the ride up through the Wantoa Parkway, and I plan to go that secondary route because there's only really two routes, and people keep asking that are from outside this area. Isn't there like side streets or some inadvertent route that he could have taken? No, there's two ways to get down to Ocean Parkway, and from his general area, and one is going out towards the east, and the other one is the one that I went, going a little bit west and then going south. So all the roads have to go south. So he's going east to go south down Robert Moses Causeway and on to Ocean Parkway, or down to the Wantoa State Parkway.
You know, there was some speculation, you know, that he owns or is a part owner of a duck boat used for duck hunting with a friend, and that he could potentially have used the duck boat to do that. Well, yeah and no, but I keep thinking Occam's razor. You know, the simplest of explanations tends to be the truth, right? Because first of all, you know, simple search of the Department of Environmental Conservation shows that the Gilgo State Park doesn't allow waterfowl hunting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the waterfowl hunting is specific months in the year. There's December to January, and I think there was like another one, September to something rather. And so it's limited in time when that would be. So if he's going to try to use the boat, he would have to drive to the boat, get the boat, bring the boat, launch the boat, or, you know, get the body in the boat,
Right.
you know, and then if he's going to use that as an alibi, oh, I'm duck hunting. Well, you're not allowed to duck hunt here.
Yeah.
You know, if you get stopped, right? And all the while, you know, he's got to be worried that anybody sees him doing all
I
this.
think a lot of the headlines too initially had he was across the bay
Yeah.
from the site. And I think people automatically went to, well, maybe he got there, he's taking the bodies there in his boat. Does he have
Yeah.
a boat?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
And you know, it's not the most practical route to get there, and right. If you're going to dump human remains, you're taking them from your car to the dock into the boat. It's more steps, and I think that it would just
More
be more of
crimes,
a,
well, a duck boat is not the kind of boat that you leave in the water. A duck boat,
or any
you know,
boat, or any
yeah.
boat for that matter, because people were
Yeah.
speculating boats, because now everyone's the wheels are spinning here. So
yeah, too
But,
much speculation.
you know, he can't see Google from his house. Gilgo from his house. Google can't
No.
see Gilgo Beach from his house. There is a park where this News Nation reporter went, and if he had binoculars, you may be able to see across, but that's a far reach in my eyes. You know, again, he wasn't keeping tabs and watching them through binoculars as this reporter reported. I laughed at it, and I'm sorry. It's just, you know, it's just something that I guess they need to fill up some of the time. So you will hear more about this craziness. But at the end of the day, you know, there's treasure troves of evidence from within that home that we don't know anything about as of yet. There will be more from that South Carolina location. It looked like a lot of, it was an open lot of just like
a junkyard.
shit all over the place. Did you
Yeah,
guys?
but his brother's living down there.
We kind of love that he's a pack rat, though. It's
Yes.
when you go on a computer crime search warrant, 9 out of 10 times the house is disgusting.
Right.
It's always there's stuff everywhere. The love-hate part of it is he's probably going to have his old cell phones from the past 15 years and old computers that he used. And, personal items are missing from these victims. Did he get rid of them or did he keep them? And are they in that hoard somewhere or in his storage locker or at one of his other houses?
Hey, friends in the
Exactly.
chat, put hashtag Ed, hashtag DutyRon, hashtag Tiffany, and put your question after that. We're going to do 10 minutes of questioning and I want to wrap it up. This is a small piece because some of the neighbors talk about this big metal door that he brought into the basement, and he told, this guy's a retired firefighter, New York City firefighter. He told him that he brought that door into the basement to secure his guns. Big commercial metal door.
Well, maybe he built a closet down there in the basement to have all those guns in there, and that's why he brought the door in.
Or, as some people were saying, maybe for something.
Well, there is, like Joel Rifkin had that special room in the basement that mom wasn't allowed to go into.
Oy vey. Let's take a listen to this, and then we'll go to the questions in the
Killer
chat.
Rex Heuermann has led to yet another state. Police in Atlantic City, New Jersey, now looking into whether he may be connected to any cases related to sex workers there. And that's in addition to police in South Carolina and Las Vegas investigating any possible ties to Heuermann. Eyewitness News reporter Stacey Sager is live in Massapequa Park. Stacey?
Well, Sandra, investigators are now retracing more than a decade of this man's interactions. We know that Rex Heuermann met some of his alleged victims as far back as 2010. So the question now, where will the evidence lead next? In a case that continues to stun those who live here in Massapequa Park, one neighbor who lives right next door to the alleged Gilgo killer, reflecting on nearly 7 days now of just about everything investigators could remove, from large backyard furniture to computers to Playboy magazines and much, much more. What's been the most significant thing you've seen them pulling out of this house?
Guns, one after another.
As the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office reveals now that the indictment against Rex Heuermann is unsealed, they're questioning sex workers currently in the county jail system for any other potential connections to the alleged serial killer. We do know others have had close calls. Former escort Nikki Brass, who says Heuermann solicited her approximately 8 years ago.
I had a really, really bad feeling. Like my gut was like telling me I needed to get away from him.
Especially when he actually mentioned the Gilgo case, she says.
When he talked about it, he would like speak in a they and hypothetical, but he had this like smile on his face that made me really uneasy.
She ended the date early. Meanwhile, the investigation now broadened to include Heuermann's property, both in South Carolina and Las Vegas, Nevada, and 2 of his Chevy Avalanches with potential forensic evidence.
Anything from hair to a trophy, souvenir, jewelry, anything that can help us connect these victims to that vehicle will be instrumental in strengthening the case.
As these neighbors can't help but recall memories of Heuermann from the past that seem all the more disturbing now, like when he'd gaze over this fence or when he brought home a giant metal door, which he told his neighbor he needed to seal off a vault in his basement.
But he told me back then, this is to protect my guns. Who gets a door like that, a monstrous door like that to protect guns? So
you're wondering what might have been, what else might have
I
been.
like this guy.
Yeah, and there's plenty.
So there you go. Just some neighbors' reactions and some of the craziness that happened over there. And look at his home, Ed. You looked at the front of it a week ago, and you were like, "What is that?" Remember, I showed it to you on Google Earth.
Yeah. The front porch being held up by 2x4s. But the thing about pack racks is we get back to that. So they don't like to separate from anything. So as Tiffany was saying, he's probably got all those old cell phones and all those old computers. And another thing too, he owns his own business, right? He's an LLC or something like he has his own business, right?
Yeah.
So when you purchase a computer for the business, that's a tax write-off, right? But you can't just throw it away after a couple of years. You have to hold on to it, right? Because if you've been deducting it from your taxes, you have to hold on to those things for a specific period of time before the IRS,
That
will,
audit period.
yeah, audit period, right. And in addition, he did get in trouble with the IRS. Apparently, he owed them like $400,000, of which he paid half of it back
Interesting.
to settle that tax issue.
Right.
That was published, but I don't have all the details on that as well. But yeah, now all those other jurisdictions, they got to be going through their cold cases and seeing the timeframes. And that's another thing too, that the internet searches of his computers and phones, any travel that he purchased during these timeframes, and see if the travel to Vegas, the travel to other South Carolina, the travel to Mass, the travel to Iceland, all of that, and then see if you can correspond when he was there to any crimes or missing persons cases that may have been committed there. Again, if there are sex trade workers out there in Vegas and out there in South Carolina, this story is international, right? If they're seeing his face and they had a date with this guy and they survived that date, they should be making phone calls to the police and, giving up the details here.
I got a question here on the screen for Tiffany, and I know this might be difficult to answer because there's what ifs, right? But comes from Jamie Lynn, and thank you, Jamie. Tiffany, how was he using one of his victims' cell phones after the fact? Was he paying the bill?
Based on the date ranges in the affidavit, the cell phones were used within days to maybe a week. It looks like even less than a month being like a stretch of a period for the one cell phone. The Bartholomew cell phone was probably used the most often, but it would have, if those are the specific dates that it was used, it was probably still in the last billing cycle or in the same billing cycle of the bill having already been paid. Or maybe these girls had to set up for auto pay and their bill was paid for the next cycle, but it didn't look like he was using them for very long. It's around the disappearance that he's using it. So it would make sense that the phones weren't off yet because maybe they had not yet missed a payment by the time he stopped using it.
And then nobody notified the provider that, the person was missing and so forth.
So here's one about the Tinder, because we know he had a Tinder profile. That was one of those creepy selfie pictures. Marianne Knapp says, Tiffany, wouldn't his wife see he's on Tinder and other groups if they have the same provider?
No. So Tinder, he's downloading to his phone, and unless she has his PIN or access to his phone and she's going through his phone, she wouldn't know unless she saw him using it.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Ed, someone just said to you, do you think Shrek did all the killing, PB&J? Do you think Rex did all the killings himself?
Well, unless there's some kind of cult out there doing this, I would think it was him. Based upon all these records that we have now, it appears that it's him. In addition, that's his, when that's your comfort level, when you have that kind of dumping ground and that you've used it time and time again, and it's all a part of his modus operandi,
Right.
I mean, again, I said this the last time, what are the odds that those other unidentified or unconnected victims that were found out there were placed there by another serial killer using the same dumping grounds?
Yeah.
Like I said, you probably would have had a better chance of winning that $1 billion mega millions.
Here's a great question that comes up a lot. Robbie from Australia says, DutyRon and Ed, because everybody wants to know our opinions, Ed. Do you think Rex's brother was in on it too? I'll answer just first, and this is just speculation. I don't know anything about his brother, nor does Ed. But his brother's being described in the media as a little bit odd as well. But there's no way you'd have to look at where the evidence takes you. And if the evidence indicates that the brother was involved in it, via electronic means, by communications, by his DNA and so forth, and we hear nothing about that. So I would have to say no at this point. Ed?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with saying that the brother is involved. I have no knowledge of that. There's all kinds of rumors that are out there, but I haven't seen anything reported about the brother and his criminal history. I mean, I've seen some things that said the brother did time and he was DWI and killed a police officer while he was drunk. But the news hasn't reported on that.
Right.
You think that would, I mean, because they went down to South Carolina, interviewed his neighbors, and you think if they had that kind of information, they would have put that out.
Arrest records are public records, so some people might have been pulling them up, and the news probably is not really interested. The big news is that the Gilgo Beach murderer is in custody.
I'd like to ask Tiffany a question though about the dark web and any of her work on the dark web, doing searches and digging up information there. Tiffany, how does that work for you? I mean, have you done any cases where you've had to get into the dark web?
I've done some background and some undercover cases where we worked with websites that were on the dark web, not with criminals, but we've, done undercover work utilizing websites. I don't think he was someone, I mean, I'd be surprised if it comes up that he's on the dark web. He doesn't seem to me to be advanced enough, but they're going to be looking at those things, and especially when they get his computer, seeing what kind of browsers he's using. Does he have the software or the right browser to access the dark web? Is he doing searches there? I tend to think that he's not that advanced of a computer user.
Yeah, so there's coming from Scott, a retired NYPD detective. He said Rex's brother did do time for DWI. He killed a housing and New York City police housing captain.
Yeah, 1988.
I heard about that. Yeah. I was on the no, I wasn't on the job yet. I got on in 91. So
rookie.
Thanks, Ed.
There was a question that popped up about the wife.
Yes,
I think a lot of people are taking snippets of the affidavit where they used her DNA, and they're like, oh, well, maybe the wife is involved. No, if you read through it, they're saying the wife is not involved. They don't believe she was involved. They're saying she's out of town at the time that these girls went missing. But also, I mean, just being a woman in your house, if he's taking this burlap he's wrapping the bodies in, or if these women were in his home, I mean, if you come in my house, my hair is probably everywhere. I'm like super crazy about cleaning up, but my hair is going to be somewhere. It's going to get on your clothes. My husband has it in his clothes. So it makes sense that, if those women were in her house or those items he wrapped them in came from the house, that her hair, her DNA might be on them.
Well, even if those women weren't in his house, the wife's hair is on him. He goes to their house or their hotel or car. And
Tiffany, thank you for saying that.
The burlap he's storing in the basement.
Thank you for talking about your hair is everywhere, because I did that 3 shows ago and I got crucified for it. And Ed even jumped on the bandwagon because I said my wife, her hair sheds all over the place. So it is what it is. I said a little bit more than that, but
you don't share that kind of information about your wife.
Whatever. Anyways, here's Cassie Ferguson. She says, and because she might have came in late, hashtag Tiffany, what is your title? Expertise. It isn't by your name. I'm surprised she didn't ask for your social security number. I'm only kidding, Cassie. Thank you for the question.
So my background is in computer crimes. I have a master's in cybersecurity, and then I worked internet crimes against children for a very long time. I was a digital forensic examiner. I was assigned to the FBI's CART task force for a little while, and now I do forensics on my own. I was previously a director on a forensics team for a consulting firm in New York as well.
Wow. So she does a lot of stuff. Nothing gets by Tiffany. I tell you, if I was her husband, I would keep my cell phone right out on the counter and I'd be like, here it is. Take a look at it. I'm all good. No burners for me.
That's it.
So
see, I have biometrics on mine. You got to use my fingerprint. So
there you go. Jolene said she heard in the news that Rex Heuermann's wife filed for divorce. Yes, yesterday, I believe. Ed, correct me if I'm wrong.
It was all over the news today. Yesterday,
she went to Suffolk County Courthouse and she filed for divorce. Work hard, be nice, says Tiffany. Great info.
Oh, thank you.
let's see if there was any other questions. Ed, did you see anything go by?
I think we touched on a lot of it.
A lot. Great expertise,
Yeah.
Princess Michelle says. Thanks for being here with us, Tiffany, she says.
I mean, I can't wait to see when all of these computers come back and cell phones. I want to know what's in that house.
Oh
I'm
yeah, I
dying.
definitely want to know. Yeah.
Saw all the junk that was coming out of there. I mean, they're taking whole filing cabinets.
Right. And I wanted to go in one other area, Ed, and I'm sorry to cut you off. The cars. He has those 2 Chevy Avalanches, the one he sold to his brother that they flatbedded back from South Carolina, and then his newer, I don't know if it was a 2022 or a 20, whatever the year, it seemed like a newer model. Onboard computers, I know you're not a car expert, but Tiffany, can you talk about maybe some of the data that they may or may not be able to pull out of not just the newer model vehicle, but the older?
They're going to get location data from that car if he used that nav for anywhere. And if he ever connected his smartphone to that car, it can retain call logs if he's answering messages from the interface in the car. So there could be another whole treasure trove of information from the navigation system, especially if he's using that navigation system to go places, which I kind of think with the things that he does. I mean, he makes the fake account and then he sends a selfie of himself, from the fake account. So I'm thinking at some point he's probably plugging stuff into that GPS in that car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the data. Yeah, absolutely. He's getting his text messages and all of that.
We had our auto crime specialist who's going to come back on, Detective Tom. He's now fully retired. I think he got out in February of this year. He was a little apprehensive about coming on the show a lot because he was still active in the NYPD. But Tommy reached out to me just like you and I back and forth, Tiff. He was like, I told you 75% of all homicides involve a car. And here we are. Long Island's serial killer, one of the biggest cases, the most notorious case in Long Island history, involves vehicles. It can involve several vehicles. He talked about the infotainment system, and thank you for bringing that up. Again, a wealth of great information, Tiff. If you plug in, and even if when it asks you to download the contacts and you say no, it still does it, according to Tommy. Is that true?
Depending on the car, a lot of cars we have seen, and just from I'm vehicle forensics, I've taken some classes in it. It's not overall my expertise, but I do some chip off, and we can do that on infotainment systems that are not supported by some software, and they retain a lot more records than they're telling you. And I say that about internet service providers, about everything. You ask for something and you shall receive. So sometimes you send them a subpoena and you add all these things they tell you they don't keep. And look, you get it back in a few months and there's all that information they said that they didn't have.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question from Lucy Bell to me. Once the divorce is complete, can the wife testify against him / dissolve marital privilege? I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I think, that might be a possibility. We'd have to ask Melanie Little. We'll ask her.
Well, she'd have to know something to testify against them. Okay.
Right. Everybody thinks that she knows everything. Like,
right.
They could have a shitty relationship where they don't communicate. Many people, unfortunately, many marriages stay together for the children's sake or whatever the sake, and they have no line of communication. This guy could have been just doing his thing and not question and not ask questions and stuff like that. So
I'm sure the task force looked at her, and and I think they've already made statements. She's not a suspect.
Yeah, they took her phones. They took probably all of her tech, because don't forget, I believe her and her daughter were working in that architect firm. So according to the media, she worked for him and did whatever office where, I don't know, but the wife and the daughter worked for him. So all of their computers and all of their communication, the task force has got that. The FBI has got that.
Everybody in that house, they're taking all of those devices. They have to at least clear them. Even if they don't think the person did anything, they have to say, we looked at it and there's nothing on here.
And the extended family, right, Tiff? Cousins, aunts, uncles, friends,
With the
Well,
extended
maybe
family,
not
that's
friends.
where it gets a little tricky. They would need to have some kind of probable cause to take that person's device. They can ask for consent to look at anybody's, phones or computers, but if the person says no, they would need a reason, especially if it's, a
See,
cousin or.
it's much easier to make an application for to seize the wife and the children's phones that are living directly with him, to see if he ever used their phones to communicate with these workers, and tried to hook up or dates with them or whatever the case may be.
Oh, Ed, you had a question up on the thing, and I just took it off.
No, it wasn't a question. It was one of our people in the chat was just stated that there was a report that the brother down in South Carolina, he had this pet peeve about, he warned all his neighbors not to be mowing their grass on Sunday. And one of his neighbors was mowing his grass on Sunday, and he went up to him from behind and hit him in the head with a pipe or something.
Oh, Jesus. Wow. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about some of this craziness. Lucy Bell says, DutyRon, I feel sorry for the wife and family. Wife and the daughters, I imagine they're traumatized. I would think so too. I am asking about testimony because she may be able to help strengthen the police evidence that she didn't know was significant. It's a possibility, but I think they have a very strong digital and forensic case right now with those hair the hair. It wasn't even, was it strands of hair, Ed? It was
strands of hair.
So it was strands of hair. The wife's was on 2 or 3 of the victims, and his was on one.
And his
Was on one. So that's pretty damning in itself. And then all of the digital data and the communication and the taunting and the phone calls, this case is as solid as it can get. And anything that they get from that house or from the cars or from secondary and other locations is just a bonus, I think. So let's get ready to wrap it up. Tiffany, I just wanted to get your final thoughts on, the digital forensics, and anything that that you could add to this that maybe we might have missed here tonight.
I mean, I've seen a lot of online chatter. His attorneys were calling it circumstantial. I think the totality of all these pieces put together paints a very clear picture of his involvement in this case. I mean, you have, the cell phone towers were giving you records that he's in a general vicinity, but it's, doesn't seem coincidental that with all of these victims, he's in the vicinity, his burner phone's in this vicinity, their phone is in the vicinity of either his home or his office. So that, upon, linking IP addresses back to his home address, selfies of him sent from the fake accounts he used to communicate with some of these girls, all of this evidence, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, because we don't know what else is there yet. They're still digging through everything that they've taken recently from the home and, having to catalog and go through all this digital evidence. So months from now, we're going to be hearing about all this other evidence that they were able to find in that home. And then you add on DNA, you just wrap it up with a little bow. There's, I don't know how you talk your way out of that one.
Yeah. And how can you explain your phone, your burner phones, calling the victim's phones? Okay. How do you explain that away? Somebody take your burner phone from you and dial these victims?
And he's arrested, he's got a burner phone in his pocket.
Right. And he went that day and bought a new burner phone or re-upped the time.
He put minutes on one of the other phones that he already had that was involved. And they have him on video doing that. It's clearly him. And they had eyes on him from the street, someone seeing him, surveilling him.
Yes, exactly.
So this is
pattern they layered together.
This is something I have linked in the description. It's gilgocase.com. There's a lot of information on here, but these are the 10 victims. There's an 11th, which is, I believe, a child. Again, if you want to go for, good information, the stuff that's on here is backed up with, media and data to follow up on all of the research that this is an independent website, but it's pretty darn good. So it's gilgocase.com, and I've got it linked in the description. And these are the victims. And that's what this is about. Again, I want to just say, before we close up, if you guys are not yet, again, subscribed to this community, consider subscribing for educational live streams where we do not sensationalize and we do not try to create, or lead you down a rabbit hole that is not backed up by facts and evidence. And that's what we try to stick to. And that's probably one of the primary reasons why we may not blow up with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, hundreds of thousands of views, because we kind of stick to, from a police perspective, what the facts are of the case. We're not creating or trying to start some type of theory or stories or create our own stories. We're giving you what we are seeing in front of us. And we bring on experts like Tiffany. And we do appreciate the time that you take out from your busy day to take an hour plus out of your Thursday night to come and hang out with us. So if you don't mind, I would love to have you come back again and continue this conversation.
Oh, of course, I would love to. And I can't wait until we see what new evidence is going to come up.
Amen. Amen. Oh man, it's going to be a treasure trove. I know it.
Oh man. And
There's going to be a lot on this case.
It's like every day there's something different and something new. I'm looking forward to the fourth piece, the charge on the fourth victim. I'm looking forward to the Suffolk County DA adding that on to his, the three girls he's already charged with. So Maureen Brainerd Barnes, her family's looking for justice, and all of the rest, whether it's a different person who committed these heinous acts or if it's this guy, Rex Heuermann. We want to just see justice. And I believe that Rodney Harrison and the task force are not going to stop until they close all of these cases out. And, they got a lot of work ahead of them. So, Ed, I know you got some final thoughts for the audience, and I know you're looking at the chat.
You know it, folks. Stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your six.
And as I like to always say at the end of these, God bless all of us here in the chat. God bless everyone that's watching across the globe. But these victims' families, we send them strength, prayers, and positive vibes. This has been a nightmare for so long for all of these victims. And it doesn't matter what they did or what they were doing at the time. They're human beings just like you and I. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Tiffany, thank you for being here. If you don't mind, stay just for another minute because I want to talk to you afterwards. So guys, on the replay, thank you to the replay viewers. Thank you to the super chatters. Thank you to the people who's newly subscribed. And thank you to the moderators. If you have questions, leave them for us down in the comment section. We will look at the questions and we will answer them. Good night from New York City and various different locations. These two are in Jersey or something like that. I don't know. All right, guys. Good night.